Faith and Movement is proud to present the framework of a Christian state, an introduction to social science, by Father Cahill. When once men recognize, both in private and public life, that Christ is King, society will at last receive the great blessings of real liberty, well-ordered discipline, peace, and harmony. From Pope Pius XI, in the encyclical on the Kingship of Jesus Christ. Dedication to our Lord Jesus Christ, King of the world and of every state and nation. May rulers in their people's name thy Godhead solemnly proclaim. Judges and teachers homage pay. Arts and the law accept thy sway. From the Roman Breviary, Office of the Feast of Jesus Christ the King. Preface. The matter of the present book was originally prepared in connection with the writer's duties as Professor of Social Science in Milltown Park, Dublin. The greater part of it has been already published in the Irish Ecclesiastical Record and the Irish Monthly between the years 1924 and 1930. The same matter has formed the basis of a series of lectures, of which summaries have appeared weekly in the Irish Catholic, which the writer has been giving to the central branch of An Rial Nacht since the foundation of that association in 1926. Subscript. An Rial Nacht, the League of the Kingship of Christ, was founded in Dublin, October 31st, 1926, on the occasion of the first celebration of the Feast of Jesus Christ the King. Its objects are the study and propagation of Catholic social principles and the promotion of Catholic action. Grateful acknowledgments are due to the editors of the Irish Ecclesiastical Record and the Irish Monthly for their kind permission to republish in their present form the articles which appeared in these reviews. The book is intended primarily for students of social science who accept the Church's teachings. Its main purpose is to summarize and present, in a consecutive and more or less scientific form, the main elements of the teaching of the Roman Pontiffs, especially Leo XIII and our present Holy Father, Pope Pius XI, the Catholic bishops, and the standard Catholic authors on questions connected with social organization and public life, including such topics as personal rights and duties, the privileges and position of the family in the social organism, the interrelations of capital and labor, the place of religion in public life, education, the functions of the state, its constitution, laws and administration, the due interrelations of its component parts with one another, its relations with the Church, etc. Here and there in the book will be found suggestions, borrowed mostly from approved Catholic writers, as to practical means of realizing Christian principles and ideals in social and civic organization. The principal non-Catholic theories on the subjects discussed, and modern non-Christian tendencies and movements are also dealt with, and the well-being of the people under the Christian regime, as illustrated from history, is compared with their position in the non-Christian state. Following the precedent of French, American, and English writers on the same subjects, the author has striven to give special prominence to those aspects of the questions dealt with, which seem to have special importance in his own country, and he naturally chooses his illustrations of principles and their applications from existing circumstances in Ireland, the country with which he is most familiar. The main portions of the work, however, apply to all countries. Hence, the writer hopes that the book may prove useful even to non-Irish readers. On that account, he has relegated to appendices the treatment of certain aspects of the social question, which are rooted in historical causes peculiar to Ireland. The writer wishes to thank very sincerely the kind friends whose invaluable assistance and patient collaboration have enabled him to complete much sooner than he could otherwise have hoped the tedious work of preparing the book for publication. He wishes also to thank those other friends whose helpful advice and friendly criticism have assisted him very much in the work of revision. Finally, he gladly acknowledges the great assistance he has received from the discussions carried on during the past 5 years at the meeting of An Nacht. These discussions have served especially to throw light on many practical questions, and have given the writer an insight into certain aspects of his subject with which he would be otherwise unacquainted. Written, Milltown Park, Dublin. Feast of Jesus Christ the King, 1931. Preliminary Chapter. A Christian state is one in which the laws and administration, as well as the organized activities and general outlook of the citizens, are in accordance with Christian principles. These principles, insofar as they are applicable to social and public life, are practically identical with the dictates of the natural law. It is with these principles and their practical application in the life of the state that social science has to do. Term sociology or social science. The term social science or sociology means etymologically the science of society, or the science that deals with man in his social relations. The subject, however, notwithstanding its great importance at the present day, has scarcely yet secured full recognition, at least among non-Catholic writers, as a distinct science, nor are men in agreement as to its complete object and scope. Although there are chairs of sociology in very many of the universities of the world, it does not appear that the sciences taught under that name in the different universities are always founded on the same principles, or that the subject matter dealt with is the same in every case. Most Catholic writers, however, now recognize social studies as a distinct science and are in substantial agreement as to its object and scope. Non-Christian sociology. According to Auguste Comte and the writers of the positivist school of philosophy, the purpose of sociology would be to collect and coordinate the facts of human history which bear upon the intellectual and social development of the human race, in order to found upon the knowledge thus obtained a complete scheme for the direction of individual and social conduct. Such a view, which would make custom and utility the sole rule of human actions, and eliminate completely God's eternal law, cannot, of course, be admitted by the Christian philosopher. Herbert Spencer and other writers of the evolutionist school, who deny human liberty, and reduce all the forces in the universe to the necessary transformation of matter and motion, adopt Comte's view regarding the scope of sociology, but develop it in accordance with the evolutionary theory. According to Spencer, the science of sociology consists in a series of generalizations of the observed facts of social life, which exhibits, he says, a perfect analogy with the life of the individual. The structure of the moral body called civil society and the functions of its several parts are said to be quite similar to the organic structure and functions of individuals, including man, and both exhibit alike their periods of growth, maturity, and decay. Spencer and the writers of his school make the study of sociology to consist mainly in the collection and coordination of facts to illustrate and prove this peculiar theory. The pantheistic philosophers of the Hegelian school of evolution, who identify man with the deity and make all man's thoughts and actions to belong to the one eternal being, evolving himself towards a fuller and more perfect reality, regard organized civil society as the highest and most perfect manifestation of the divinity. With them, the scope of sociology would be to expound and establish by abstract reasoning their theory of the nature of civil society, and to trace its gradual evolution towards the higher and better order to which, they say, it is tending. With all these dreams and speculations, we are not at present concerned. The theories of positivism, materialism, and pantheism, completely opposed as they are to common sense, and in flat contradiction of the practical experience of life, are referred to here merely to point out that sociology, or social science in the Catholic sense, is something completely different from the so-called sciences which non-Christian philosophers designate by that name. Christian sociology. But not even Christian, or so-called Christian philosophers, are in full accord as to the object and scope of sociology or social science. Many English, especially non-Catholic, writers apply the term to all studies that relate to the social improvement of man. They often use the term sociology or social science merely as a general heading under which to treat such subjects as social reform, ethics, charity, relief work, statistics, criminology, politics, etc. Besides, with many of these writers, social science, or the collection of subjects grouped under that name, would be purely empirical or inductive. Christian teaching on the nature, objects, and structure of society obtains little attention, nor are the civic rights and duties of men treated as portion of an immutable moral law. The Catholic sociologist must reject such a method of treating his subject. He will, of course, utilize experience and induction in social studies. Conclusions drawn from statistics and history, showing the ascertained results upon human well-being of various political theories and economic methods, must form an important portion of the science. But Catholic sociology rests, to a large extent, upon principles of the natural law, which are as uniform and unchanging as the essential nature of man. This will become clear from a consideration of the nature of society, which all admit to be, in some sense at least, the subject matter of sociology. Meaning of society. Society is a moral unit made up of individuals associated together for a common purpose, a mere collection of persons, who, for instance, happen to be gathered in the same room, would not form a society. The individuals must have a common purpose, some object desirable for all and sought by all, and some kind of intention or obligation of mutually assisting one another in its attainment. The idea of society requires, besides that, there be union of effort on the part of all towards securing for each and every individual of the body a due participation in the common object. For, if each one seeks the object by his own individual efforts, or for himself alone, there is no moral union. Again, the union of effort that is required must not be the result of accident or physical necessity or blind instinct. It must come from the deliberate intention on the part of the members to cooperate for the common end, or at least there must be a moral obligation to do so. Thus, a hive of bees do not form a society in the strict sense which we are assuming here. For although they are united and cooperating for a common objective, the bees, being devoid of reason and acting from blind instinct, cannot be subject to moral obligation, nor can they consciously aim at a common purpose. Hence, only rational beings, such as human persons, can form a society. Finally, the notion of society includes the idea of permanence, though not necessarily of perpetuity. A number of women who agree to take a day's outing together, or a dozen men who form one side in a tug-of-war contest, and then separate, are not commonly called a society. Hence, a society may be described as a permanent moral union of several persons for the purpose of attaining the common good by mutual cooperation. Governing authority. For the existence of such a union as is implied in the term society, the elements of social authority is essential. There must be some power present to direct the several members in their cooperation for the common good. For considering the uncertain and fluctuating character of human opinion and human will, it is clear that the permanent cooperation of several persons for a special purpose is impossible without a directing and coordinating power to harmonize the discordant elements and direct the different forces towards a common end. This coordinating influence is nothing else than social authority, without which, therefore, human society is impossible. Necessary and conventional societies. The definition of society which we have given includes not only such great societies as the state and the church, but numberless other types of social union, families, municipalities, religious orders, commercial companies, relief committees, sporting clubs, etc. All are societies. Now of these different types, it will be observed that some owe their origin solely to the free choice of the individuals that compose them. The founders of the society constitute it after what manner they think well, and the members are free to enter the society or not as they please. Such societies are called free or conventional societies. Examples of this type are religious orders, charitable societies, trading companies, sporting clubs, etc. There are other societies which in no way owe their origin to their members' choice. The Church, for instance, was founded by the direct intervention of God, and its constitution cannot be altered or interfered with by any human authority. Besides the Church, there are two, and only two, other types of human society, whose existence and structure are not of mere human origin, or liable to essential change. These are the family and the state or nation. The family and the state are a necessary result of man's nature. They come into existence in response to essential human tendencies and character, and to provide for needs which spring from the very nature of man. Hence there are three types of human association that form a class apart, namely, the Church, the family, and the state or nation. The existence and scope of these, the essential principles of their structure, the fundamental rights and duties of the members are determined by God's law, and cannot be altered by human authority. Of these, the Church differs from the family and the nation in that the two latter are natural societies. Their immediate object has to do with man's temporal interests, and their existence and scope, as well as their fundamental structure, spring from the law of nature, which has ordained by God in the very act of creating man. Hence, the essential principles that govern their activities can be ascertained by the light of reason. The Church, on the other hand, is supernatural. Its object is to lead men to their supernatural destiny, which is direct union with God, and its foundation and constitution depend on God's positive revelation to man. Perfect and imperfect societies. Again, the Church and the nation differ from all other types of human association, in that they are perfect societies. They, and only they, have within themselves all that is required for the complete and full realization of the ends at which they aim. Neither can, within its own sphere, be validly subordinated to any human power outside itself, while every other human society, even the family, is more or less dependent upon them. It is on this account that the Church and the state are called perfect societies, while all others, even the family, are imperfect societies. Nature and object of social science. Bearing in mind these preliminary notions, we now come to consider the precise subject matter and scope of social science. Understood literally, and in its widest sense, social science would have to do with social organization and social activities of every kind. Since, however, it is, like ethics, a natural science, and refers primarily to man's temporal good. The Church's organization activities are outside its scope. Neither does it treat of free or conventional societies, whether belonging to the natural or the supernatural order. Its scope is restricted by usage to the type of social union, which is natural and universal, namely, to the family and the state. Of these, the family, which although of fundamental importance in the life of the nation, is not a perfect society, is treated only cursorily, and, as it were, indirectly, insofar, namely, as is required to indicate its essential functions, its position in the social organism, and the attitude which the state is bound to assume in its regard. Hence, the proper subject matter of social science is civil society, usually called the state or the nation, that type of society, namely, which is at the same time universal, natural, and perfect. The ultimate object of the state is to secure the temporal happiness of its members, which, in practice, is the same thing as the fuller development of their physical, intellectual, and moral powers. The proximate and immediate aim of the state's activities is to ensure peace and prosperity for all, for these are means essential to man's temporal welfare, and can be secured only by the helps which the state affords. Social science, taken in its widest sense, would include the speculative questions which concern the purpose, origin, and constitution of the state, as well as those more practical questions which refer to social activity and the principles that govern the proper functions of the state. As the former class are usually treated at length in ethics, social science, properly so called, is confined mostly to the latter class. In other words, it is primarily a practical or normative science. Hence it may be defined as a practical science, directing social cooperation towards the more perfect attainment of the ends and aims of civil society. In other words, it is the science which directs the different members of the state in the fulfillment of their civic duties. From what has been said, it is plain that the science is partly analytical and partly inductive. That is to say, the principles upon which its conclusions are founded are of two kinds, namely, 1, a priori principles, founded upon the nature and the end of man, and the purposes and essential functions of human society, and 2, a posteriori principles which are generalizations taken from such sources as history and statistics, referring to actual or historical social conditions. Its relations with the Church. Although social science is primarily a natural science, and its principles are ascertainable by the light of reason, the student cannot ignore or dispense from the Church's teaching. In the first place, some of the principles of social science are illustrated and confirmed in the most striking manner by the truths of revelation. Thus, the principles connected with the dignity and inalienable rights of the human person are confirmed in the strongest way by the mystery of the redemption and man's elevation to the supernatural state. Besides, experience proves that social principles, although ascertainable by the light of reason, are in practice denied in large part or lost sight of wherever the Church's authority is rejected. Furthermore, even when a social system is organized on true principles, its proper working has always to meet obstacles rooted in men's passions and ignorance and sin. These obstacles can be effectually overcome only by the forces of religion. Hence, if we are to look for a social system organized and worked in accordance with true principles, we shall find it only where the guidance of the Church prevails, and a strong sense of religion pervades the community. In other words, Christian civilization is in practice the only type of civilization in harmony with the principles of social science and the dictates of right reason. its relations with kindred sciences. Social science, though closely connected with ethics, political science, or jurisprudence and political economy, still differs essentially from all of these. It differs from ethics, for the principles of ethics relate to human actions in their moral aspect, distinguishing, namely, the good from the bad, and aims at leading men to their last end. Besides, ethics has to do with all the deliberate actions of men. Social science, on the other hand, relates only to acts that are external, and is concerned merely with the bearing of these acts upon the welfare of other members of the civil body. Social science is subordinate to ethics, insofar that its principles must be in conformity with ethical standards. In other words, it cannot, for the sake of a supposed social advantage, suggest a course of action that runs counter to sound moral principles. Social science also differs from jurisprudence. The purpose of the latter is to direct the rulers of the state in framing laws and regulating their administration, with a view to the peace and prosperity of the citizens. Social science directs the citizens as well as the rulers, and includes in its scope principles and conclusions which need not, and should not, become the direct matter of civil law. Finally, social science differs from political economy. The latter refers only to the human activity that is employed about the production, distribution, and consumption of material goods. Social science, having for its object the entire temporal welfare of the citizen, includes in its scope not only his material interests, but his intellectual and moral development as well. If, however, political economy be treated, as it should by the Christian economist, so as to take full account of the influence upon social well-being of the various methods of production, distribution, and consumption, then political economy becomes practically identical with one important branch of social science. Its origin as a distinct science. Catholic sociology, as a separate subject of study, is of comparatively recent growth. The a priori principles on which it is founded are, indeed, contained in the works of St. Thomas and the great Catholic authors of the 16th and 17th centuries. The proper application, however, of the general principles to many of our modern problems is not to be found in these writers, who did not foresee the peculiar conditions of present-day society, for in their time the modern social question had not yet arisen, owing to the evils which have resulted from the disregard of civic duties in modern states, a legacy from the Protestant revolt against the Church in the 16th century. The whole question of social rights and duties has now assumed a position of paramount importance in almost every country. The poverty and oppression that weigh upon the masses of the people, the immense wealth and excessive power of the great financiers, mostly non-Christian, the great trusts and monopolies, the gambling on the stock exchange, productive of so much injustice and misery to the masses of the people, the tyranny of the bureaucracy, masquerading under the cloak of popular authority, the general unrest and widespread spirit of revolt, the antagonism between the rich and the poor, the spread of irreligion among all classes, and the general demoralization caused or promoted by the unchristian press and cinema, the activities of the gambling agencies, and numerous other influences more or less peculiar to modern society. All these are prominent features of the social question, and a clear knowledge of Christian principles is essential for dealing effectually with them. This knowledge is what social science professes to offer. Hence, although the science, properly speaking, includes within its scope all kinds of social cooperation, it is usually confined in its practical treatment to the questions which bear more directly upon the social evils of our time. History of modern social science. The two great names associated with the foundation of the science of Catholic sociology and the Catholic movement to which it has given birth are Bishop von Kettler of Mainz, who lived from 1811 to 1877, and Father A. Tapparelli, who lived from 1793 to 1862, of Rome. Kettler's contributions were greater on the practical side, and Tapparelli's on the doctrinal aspect. Kettler may be justly regarded as the founder of the Catholic schools of social reform. Pope Leo XIII pays tribute to him as his great predecessor in social teaching. Pope Pius XI, on the other hand, has more than once extolled the work and writings of Tapparelli, and refers in his most recent encyclical on Christian education to Tapparelli's classical treatise on natural right, which may be said to have laid the foundation of modern social science, as a work never sufficiently praised and never recommended strongly enough to the university student. Both these writers show how the teachings of St. Thomas and the principles of Catholic philosophy contain the solution of the modern social question. The great encyclicals of Leo XIII, promulgated in the last quarter of the 19th century, 1878 to 1901, contain a statement of the main principles of Catholic social philosophy, and are generally accepted as the groundwork of social science. The teaching which they contain has been confirmed and in some particulars more fully developed in several papal pronouncements of more recent date. The recent encyclicals of our present Holy Father Pius XI, especially those on Christian education, on marriage, and on the social order, are of the first importance in this connection. Although several of the more important questions have not yet been adequately studied, and although Catholic authors are not as yet in accord on all the points of importance, the science has progressed steadily for the last 30 years, owing to the labors of an ever-increasing number of Catholic writers, especially in Italy, France, Germany, and Belgium. Writers in the English language, owing to their Protestant environment, have naturally been late in coming into the field. In recent years, however, the Catholic movement is making itself more felt, and excellent works on different phases of Catholic social science are constantly appearing in English. Division of the subject matter. Since modern social science has taken shape in reference to the social evils which now prevail more or less in every country inhabited by Europeans, it is necessary to set forth at the outset what these evils are, and how they have arisen. Hence, the first part of our treatise will be devoted to a summary sketch of the history of social doctrines and social conditions in Europe, from pre-Christian times to the present day. In criticizing the different phases of doctrine and practice, the Catholic teaching will be indirectly shown. In the second part, we shall deal directly and explicitly with the fundamental principles of Catholic social science and their application to existing conditions.